I'm the director of the library. I have the best job in the whole city because we have the best libraries in this town. So it's great to see you all here, all you library lovers. And I hope everyone is excited as I am to meet Captain Mark Kelly and hear all about his adventures as a pilot and an astronaut and how much he loves to read. Before we get started, I want to make sure to let you know that all the kids in the room will have a chance to ask some questions. So be thinking of what you want to ask Captain Kelly. And we are going to have photo opportunities with Captain Kelly at the end of the program. So we'll line you up and you can come around on the stage and get your photo with Captain Kelly. Yeah, I know. I'm so excited too. Also, if anyone needs to know, the bathrooms are across the hall, out the back door there, across the hall. So I know everyone here has been having lots of fun reading this summer as part of our annual summer reading game and logging your minutes and having adventures through reading. Everyone is close to having your 1,000 reading minutes, right? Yes? All right. Well, we want to get on to our main event. It is my pleasure to introduce a Navy pilot who flew 39 combat missions in Operation Desert Storm, an astronaut who flew 4 missions into space and commanded Shuttle Endeavour on its final flight in May 2011. He has orbited the Earth 853 times and spent more than 50 days in space, traveling more than 22 million miles. Whew. But wait, that's not all he's done. Did you know that he's also written books? Well, he has, and we are so lucky to have him here today to share some of his stories and give us a live reading of one of his books, Astronaut, Goes to Mars. And I've heard this book, it's really, really good. So just back from Cape Canaveral, where he helped the country celebrate the 50th anniversary of our landing on the moon. Without further ado, please welcome astronaut Captain Mark Kelly.
I just almost knocked Neil Armstrong down.
I actually think that's Buzz Aldrin, by the way. It is. You know, there aren't many pictures of Neil Armstrong on the moon because Neil had the count. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you. It's great to be here at a library. I loved libraries when I was a little kid, like you. It seems like we have a big age group here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk a little bit about space, and then I'm going to read one of my books. This is my brother's book, by the way. So we're going to put this one down here. But hey, so I was a Navy pilot, then I was a Navy test pilot. I became an astronaut in 1996. I flew my first flight on the space shuttle in 2001 aboard Space Shuttle Endeavour. At the time we had Endeavour, Discovery, Atlantis, and Columbia. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about what it's like to launch in a spaceship, and then maybe land in a spaceship. And then I'll read one of my books and I'll take some questions. So while I'm talking, if you can come up with some good questions for me. Now it kind of has to be a question and not a statement. So try to think up some good questions, and I'm always looking forward to getting a new question. So, anybody heard of the space shuttle? Sorry. A lot of people. The space shuttle was the thing that we built after we sent men to the moon between like 1969 and 1972. And the first flight of the space shuttle was in 1981 when I was in about the 11th grade. But in 2001, early in the morning, I went out to the launch pad at the Kennedy Space Center. I was the pilot of Space Shuttle Endeavour. I climbed into my spacecraft with my 6 other crew members, closed the hatch, and then you got to start turning everything on. Space Shuttle, inside the cockpit, has 2,000 switches and circuit breakers. All have to be in the right place. And you're working through this really detailed and complicated checklist. There's a countdown clock that's heading towards 0. Clock stops a couple times to allow you to catch up if you've gotten behind in going through your checklist. And that's when sometimes you think to yourself, well, this is a really dumb thing to be doing. Eventually that clock gets to 6 seconds, 3-minute engines start, they get up to full power, but you don't go anywhere because you're bolted down to the launch pad with 8 giant bolts about this big. You're just bolted down, nothing holding you at the top. And then that countdown clock goes 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. When it hits 0, those bolts explode, the solid rocket boosters ignite, and it is like the hand of God came down and grabbed you and ripped you off the planet. You know how on TV, you ever watch a rocket launch on TV, it looks like you're going up really smoothly? Doesn't feel anything like that. What it feels like is, imagine if you're going down the railroad tracks on a runaway train at 1,000 miles an hour. And you just keep accelerating, a lot of vibration. We go from 0 to 17,000 miles an hour in just 8 minutes. And at the end of that 8 minutes, the main engines shut down, the big orange fuel tank comes off, that thing goes into the Pacific Ocean, and then we're in orbit around this incredible planet, and it's such an amazing thing to see. This big, round, let me say that again, round ball. Just floating there in the blackness of space. And I remember the first time I saw this, to realize that all 7.5 billion of us, we live on an island in our solar system. We're just one little planet in this big solar system. And make no mistake, we got no place else to go. We can't go to some other planet someday. We all need to do a better job taking care of this planet, planet Earth. All of us can do that. And then I dock with this big space station, million-pound space station in orbit. My crew members and I, we did a bunch of different stuff on 4 different space shuttle flights. I flew on Endeavour, then Discovery again, and then my last flight on Endeavour. And space shuttle, it is the best spaceship. I must have done something wrong. They're like trying to get me to finish this up. Space shuttle is the best spaceship ever. By far, there's never been a better spaceship. It's a pretty good rocket ship, but I gotta tell you, this thing is the worst airplane I've ever flown in my life. It flies it's a glider, first of all. It's a glider for landing, and it flies pretty much like a Coke machine or a rock. It's a really hard thing to fly. You undock from the space station, and then a couple days later, halfway around the planet, you slow down a little bit, and now you're gliding. And you glide back into the atmosphere, and when you hit the atmosphere of the Pacific Ocean, there's a lot of heat. And we go across the Pacific Ocean in a giant ball of fire. And it's 5,000 degrees, 1 foot outside the window. And we go screaming across the Pacific in this ball of fire. And at that point, you cannot land in Hawaii or California or Texas or Arizona. You got to go all the way to the Kennedy Space Center and land on a runway, one runway. Pretty long. Have any of you seen this runway? Have you seen this runway? Anybody seen the runway? You may have noticed that there's water on both sides of the runway. The whole length. You know what's in water in Florida? Alligators. I think NASA put that there as added motivation to land a $2 billion spaceship on the runway. So eventually we come, and it glides and, 10 times steeper than an airliner, and then we touch down at 200 miles an hour, put a parachute out, we roll down the runway, and then we stop. And that was the final flight of Space Shuttle Endeavour. But let me back up for a second. On my first flight on Space Shuttle Endeavour in 2001, I flew, there were 7 crew members, myself included. There were also 18 other little passengers. And those passengers were a bunch of mice for a science experiment. And 17 of these mice, once we got into space, they were really scared. They didn't want to be there. They were like clinging on the inside of the cage. But there was one guy, one little guy, who's in the other book. This guy right here, who would fly around across the cage, go get his water, go get his food, seemed to be having a pretty good time. So I wrote a book about him, and his name's Meteor, the Astronaut, and in this book, this is the first kid's book I wrote. He gets to go into space with his other mouse friends, and his name's Meteor, the Astronaut, and he saves the day on the space shuttle. He saves the whole mission. He saves the lives of the crew. He saves the whole thing. And when he gets back, they give him his own spacesuit and a helmet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read you the next book, which is called, I'm going to read you this one. By the way, this is my brother's book too, right here. I'm going to put that one in this special pile. So this one's called Astronaut Goes to Mars. And I don't know if you guys can see in the back. You probably can't, but I'll hold this up a little bit. So, this says, so here's the rocket. Here's Meteor in his cage. And it says the Galaxy rocket was just 1 week from launching. It would be the first human mission to Mars. No mice. Even though Mars was Earth's neighbor, the astronauts would need to travel more than 35 million miles to get there. You know what planet's closer than Mars? Venus. They would have to go 35 million miles, and Meteor, he just couldn't wait to go. He thought he has his spacesuit from the other book. He's certainly going to be picked to go to Mars. And it says the astronauts had a lot of training to do for their 2-year trip. 2 years. And Meteor watched everything they did. Each day he looked over the astronauts' shoulders as they studied, sat under the table, listened while they ate and talked, and he even kept a notebook of the flight plan and procedures. See him over here under the table? I know you guys in the back can't see what I'm pointing at, but just make believe you can. Meteor was certain that he'd be going to Mars too. He might not be the biggest astronaut, but he has some power of being small. He worked hard to stay in shape. He ran with Claudia. He did chin-ups with Claire. He lifted weights with Charlotte. Now, Claudia and Claire are my 2 kids, my 2 daughters. Charlotte, my niece. The Astronaut was ready. I just named them. These mice aren't actually my kids. I just named the mice after my children. But when the names of the crew were called out, Meteor's name wasn't one of them. He wasn't on the list, and he thought NASA must have forgotten about me. But there wasn't a chance that Meteor was going to miss this exciting trip. He was small, he could hide, he would stow away. You know what that means? Stow away? That means when you climb onto the thing, like the ship or the airplane, you're not supposed to be on. So he packs up his flight suit, his launch and entry suit, and while this guy's distracted, you see Meteor here, he slowly and carefully climbs the launch tower. And when the guy isn't looking, he climbs into the spacecraft. And he tried to be as quiet as he could, but he was scared. He wasn't scared about the rocket launch. He's done that already. He was scared that he'd get caught and wouldn't be able to go. And then the clock goes, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. When it hits 0, I like that, lift off. You know, blast off is not a good option. That would be a really bad day. So the rocket shook. Meteor was pushed against the floor. He held on tight so he wouldn't slide out from under the seat he was hiding under. There was a lot of vibration, much more than he remembered from his launch on the space shuttle, but not enough to bother a Astronaut. 9 minutes later, they were in space, and Meteor loved the feeling of weightlessness. There's no gravity in space. You just float around. See him floating around? During the journey, Meteor stayed hidden. He would only come out for crumbs, for something to eat when the astronauts slept. As Earth got smaller behind them, the red dot that was Mars got bigger. So here you see little red dot, big Mars, little Earth. After 6 months, they finally arrived. That's how long it would take for us to go to Mars. 6 months. Meteor stayed hidden the entire time. He just stayed out of the way. He only came out at night. When no one was looking, though, he peeked out the window and saw the different shades of red and orange. You know why Mars is red? It's just, yeah, that's right, it's rusted. It's just rusted. It's kind of old. Mars was nothing like Earth, but it was still beautiful in its own way. He heard the astronauts making plans. Two of them would go down to the surface of Mars in another ship and explore the surface of Mars on foot with a rover. But there was a problem. Galaxy's commander was talking to Mission Control in Houston. One of the landing craft's engines had failed its test, and it wasn't going to work. The remaining engine, not strong enough to carry even one astronaut down to the planet. So there would be no trip to the surface. So they went 6 months there, they got there, and nobody was going to go down to the surface of Mars. This mission was going to be a failure, and they were going to have to go back home to Earth. But the Mousetronaut had an idea. He shot out of his hiding place to the surprise of the crew. "Meteor, where were you hiding?" the commander says. They were happy to see him, but still sad about this failed mission. Then Meteor floated over to the hatch leading to the landing craft. It is possible," said the commander. "One rocket engine could work for somebody small enough." It was decided. Meteor, the Mousetronaut, would be the first to set foot on Mars. As he put on his spacecraft, the crew gave him instructions. "Now you need to gather plenty of rock samples," one of them said. "And don't forget to bring back some soil," said another. Last of all, they made a tiny American flag from one of their suits and fastened it to a straw. And then he put on his suit. Meteor tied himself to the seat of the landing craft with some string. It launched from the spacecraft and made its way to the surface of Mars. A few parachutes. Mars has a little bit of an atmosphere, but a big old cushion to land on. The Martian landscape was unlike anything Meteor had seen before. There were no plants. There was no water that he could see. But most importantly, there were no cats. Because he's a mouse. He doesn't want to come across any Martian cats. So he got to work right away, getting some of those samples, and the last thing he did before reboarding the landing craft was he planted the tiny American flag in the soil. Newspapers around the world declared Meteor a hero. "Meteor, you saved the day," the crew cheered as he returned to the ship. "You'll be in newspaper headlines across the globe." The Mousetronaut felt very proud, and then they also said, "We'll make sure we take you with us next time." So he came back to Earth. There he is in a parade. And 6 months later, the Galaxy rocket returned to Earth. The astronauts were all welcomed as heroes, but the smallest among them was the biggest hero of all. Thank you. So, who's got a good question for me? Guy with the helmet. Now, did you build that space helmet? Did you make that space helmet? She left out the visor. Don't go out into space without the visor. All right, what's your question? It is a lot of fun to be in space. There's no gravity. You get to float all the time. You float while you eat. You float while you sleep. You even float while you go into the bathroom. Yes, I like the shirt, by the way.
What's the most difficult thing when you're in space?
The most difficult thing? Well, there's a lot of stuff to do. It's really complicated. It's hard to keep up with everything that they want you to do. So, how about you?
How old are you?
How old am I? I am 27 years old. Right. No, I'm kidding. How old do I look? If you say 80, I'm going to be really upset. Yes, right here. Yeah. She wants to know, how do you become an astronaut? First of all, you got to do pretty good in school. You don't have to always be the top of your class. I wasn't when I was really little. I got better as I got older. So remember, you can always improve. But often astronauts are military pilots, scientists, and engineers, and medical doctors. So if you want to be an astronaut, it kind of helps to do one of those things. And you know, you gotta do a little studying. You gotta work hard. You gotta listen to your teachers and your parents. The number one thing, you gotta listen to your parents. Yes, in the blue. When I first made it into space, what was my reaction? So you got a lot of stuff to do. You got to get out of your seat. I think the biggest surprise was how little of force it takes to move around the inside of the spaceship. So you think you're going to like push off from the wall to go like a few feet over here. You use your fingertips and you barely touch anything to move around. That was a big surprise. How about the NASA shirt?
What advice do you have for young people who want to be
Advice for young people who want to be leaders, I would say go out there and get a lot of different experiences, doing a lot of different things, you know, where you can draw on those experiences. So have like, you know, a diverse, you know, amount of things that you have done. And I think that helps when you're, you know, want to be in a leadership position, that you have experience you can draw upon. All right. The other guy with the helmet.
Did you see any alien spaceships in space?
Did I see any aliens in space? Have you guys ever been to Area 51? Have you heard of it? So I've been to Area 51. There were no aliens in Area 51 because they moved them. They moved them to Area 52. No, I did not see any alien spaceships. But you know what? It's not a bad question because we live in a pretty big universe. There are 2 trillion galaxies in our universe. And each one of those galaxies have about 500 billion stars. So how many stars are there in the universe? Anybody do that math? 2 times 10 to the 12 times 500 times 10 to the 9, whatever that is. That is like, that's a lot. So there's a lot of potential. There's a lot of potential for life in our universe. But as far as we know, you know, as far as we know, so far, we are like the only life that we know that exists in our galaxy and the universe. But there's a lot of potential out there. So we just need to keep exploring. How about in the pink shirt with the rainbow? Why do I like space so much? Well, I like space so much because it's, first of all, it's serving my country, and it's doing something that's really challenging, and it's also something that helps out our country, helps our economy. We have to invent things to go into space, and it's really good for us as a nation. Yes? But I already had your sister ask a question, so. But you got a notebook, so this should be a good one. So the question is it hard with no gravity in space? So it's both hard, makes some things hard, makes other things easy. If you have to move something, like if I was on the space shuttle, and here's an example, I had to move one time, one of my other crew members wasn't available, and I had to move this thing that was the size of a refrigerator that on Earth weighed 600 pounds, had 600 pounds of mass. But I didn't have somebody to help me to move it, so I just moved it by myself. Because in space it doesn't have any weight. But you got to be really careful. You don't want to move it too fast, or if it hits something, it could break it. It's also difficult to deal with a lot of things because you cannot put anything down. You know why you can't put anything down? Because there is no down. There's no up, there's no down. All right, in the back with the yellow shirt.
How long have you been an astronaut?
I was an astronaut from 1996 to 2011. So about 15, a little over 15 years. All right. Yes. Yep, with another NASA shirt on. See, the NASA shirt gets you something. Have I seen a gamma ray burst? Can you detect what? That's actually an interesting question. So, there's a lot of radiation in space. There's alpha particles, beta particles, gamma particles. Gamma comes from, let's say, the background radiation. If you close your eyes at night, before you fall asleep, if it's dark in the cockpit where you are, you can see what looks like a lightning storms going on inside of your eyes with your eyes closed. And that is gamma particles hitting your retina. So you can actually see the gamma radiation, which might come from a gamma ray burst. So the answer is yes, you can see it. Now, you wouldn't know what direction it came from, you wouldn't know the intensity, but you can see gamma particles when it's dark with your eyes closed. Yes?
Okay, what does it feel like to be just floating around?
So what does it feel like to be just floating around? Kind of similar to like if you go in a pool and you kind of sink to the bottom, but you're not going to be wet and there's no resistance from the water. Feels a little bit like that. How much more time do I have? Okay, I'm going to take 2 more questions. What about the young lady there with the glasses? Oh, how is it to be a Navy pilot? That's a really fun job too. Launching off of an aircraft carrier, in an airplane, catapulted, 5 Gs, you go up in the air, you go off and do your mission, then you got to come back and land on this tiny little postage stamp looking thing in the ocean. It's rather challenging, but when things are challenging and hard, they happen to be much more rewarding. So I'm going to take 1 more question, the guy all the way in the back. Yeah, you.
What is beyond the universe?
What's that?
What is beyond the universe?
Oh, what is beyond the universe? So we don't know. We're not even sure the size of the universe. We're pretty sure that it has at least 2 trillion galaxies. But the problem is the universe is about 13.9 billion years old. So we can only see light as far as it has traveled in 13.9 billion years. And beyond that, we have no other way to detect anything. So there are some theories that the universe could be infinite. That's not the accepted theory right now. We think the universe has a finite size. We also know it's expanded. Think of the universe as a balloon that keeps getting bigger. And space and time exist on the surface of this balloon. That's where all the galaxies exist. And that kind of gives you an idea of what the universe is. 1 more question from somebody all the way in the back, 1 adult. Somebody had their hand up. You got apparently, yes.
What was your major in whatever?
So what was my major in college? I had an undergraduate degree in marine engineering, which is engineering for ships. And then I have a master's degree in aeronautical engineering. So thank you very much, everybody. And I'll be hanging around to take some pictures. Can I see your helmet? Oh, wow. Pretty hard.
All right, so we're going to get started with the line. So families come together.